Welcome everybody. My name's Jeff Gray. I'm a senior consultant with Cbus, and I've put together this very brief video to talk about COVID-19 and the early release of super. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put up a PowerPoint presentation and just go through some of the issues that I think are relevant and what you should be thinking about around the early release of super. So first things first, it's important that you know that this presentation is what we call general advice. It's general because I don't know your financial situation. So I don't know whether what I'm talking about today is relevant to you or not. What I would recommend you do is get what we call personal advice, which is where you talk to a financial advisor about your individual situation. Also, make sure you read a relevant product disclosure statement. So if you are thinking about maybe putting money into super or taking money out of super, make sure you read a relevant product disclosure statement. That'll give you all the ins and outs about how a particular product works. I think if you do both of those things, if you get some personal advice and if you read a relevant product disclosure statement before you implement any strategy, I think you'll find a lot less surprises down the track. So here's my details up here. I'm based in Melbourne and working from home at the moment. So the impact of COVID-19, we know that it's had a major disruption to our lives. We felt that with the isolation, the lockdown, but it's also had an impact on our super balance. Now that's primarily come about because there's been a high level of volatility in world share markets. And what we're seeing investors react negatively when there's any uncertainty, and we've certainly had a lot of uncertainty of late. So that pushes the markets down. Then what we generally see is you see the government announce some support measures, and those are generally taken quite favourably by the markets. So that pushes markets back up. So at the moment we're getting this, certainly once we've got down to this level, we're getting this 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Also, we know that there's a high level of unemployment and underemployment out there. So companies are either shutting down totally or they're going into what I'd call hibernation mode, which is they're just trying to idle. They're just trying to tick over and make sure that once this passes, we're able to get up and running again. So some of the support measures in place, there's been quite a raft of support measures, not just by federal and state governments, but also by Australian businesses. Let's just touch on a couple. From the government perspective, there is the job seeker payment. Now the job seeker payment is it used to be called the New Start allowance, but it's been rebadged with a number of other payments. It's now called job seeker. But the government has added an extra $550 a fortnight to the usual payment. So now an individual, a sole person, individual can get just over $1,100 a fortnight of the job seeker payment. Also, there's a job keeper. Now, this one applies for employers. So if you're an eligible employer, you can apply for the job keeper payment, which is a payment of $1,500 per employee. And it's a way of helping subsidise the cost of keeping employees on your books. So it's very important, and it's a great way, again, just to keep that business in ticking over mode and to help subsidise the cost of keeping your employees. There is also financial support for apprenticeships. I think the government is now picking up about 50% of the cost of apprentices, which again is great. There's childcare assistance, so there are no childcare fees right through till the 1st of July of this year. And there's also been a freeze on evictions, so a landlord can't turf out a tenant who can't pay because they've been impacted by COVID-19. Now, from an industry scheme perspective, you want to make sure you touch base. You may have an industry scheme which may be, let's say, a long service leave scheme or maybe a redundancy scheme. You're going to want to touch base with those avenues just to see what benefits may be there. And obviously, your union is best placed to help you with that sort of information. But the one we're here to talk about mostly today is the early access to super. So the government is now going to allow anyone who's eligible to access up to $20,000 from your super account. Now there is criteria that applies, and I'll go through that in a couple of slides. This early access to super, it's administered by the ATO via the MyGov website. So don't apply to Cbus for this benefit if you need to access it. You log on to your MyGov website, you go through to the link to the ATO, and then there's a bit of a tick box process there. And this early access to super, it came into effect from the 20th of April 2020. Let's have a look at how it works. So if you're eligible, you may be able to access up to $10,000 of your super before the 1st of July this year, and then potentially up to a further $10,000 from your super account between the 1st of July and the 24th of September this year. And if you are eligible to make that withdrawal, it will be received totally tax-free. So there's no tax to pay on this withdrawal. And as I mentioned earlier, it is administered through the ATO. So this is not administered by Cbus. The ATO administer it. And once you've applied through to the ATO will send information through to Cbus that says, yes, please release this amount to this member. As I said, this opened up from the 20th of April this year, and I have given you a link there. If you want some more information, just log into the ATO website and there's a bit more information there. I will give you a couple more links towards the end of this presentation for further information if you need it. So, who is eligible? Now it's basically divided into two camps. We've got Australian and New Zealand citizens and permanent residents, and we've also got some other rules for temporary residents. So let's have a look at both of those. So for Australian and New Zealand citizens and permanent residents, to be eligible, you have to satisfy one of the following requirements. Either you're unemployed, or you're eligible to receive the likes of a job seeker payment, or on or after the 1st of January 2020, you were made redundant, or your working hours were reduced by 20% or more, or for sole traders, your business was suspended or there was a reduction in your turnover of 20% or more. So there's the eligibility criteria if you're an Australian and New Zealand citizen and a permanent resident. Now, if you're a temporary resident, different rules apply. Temporary residents are only permitted to apply for one payment of up to $10,000, and that has to be before the 1st of July this year. So while permanent residents can apply for up to the 2 payments, temporary residents can only apply for up to 1 payment. And depending on what visa you're on will dictate what the eligibility criteria is. So you can see there on the left-hand side or the right-hand side of your screen, sorry, if you're a student visa holder and you've held that for 12 months or more and you're unable to meet your immediate living expenses, you're eligible to apply. For temporary skilled work visa holders, if your working hours have reduced to 0, but you still remain engaged with your employer, you're eligible to apply. And for a temporary resident visa holder, so not including students or skilled worker visas, and you can't meet your immediate living expenses, again, you're eligible to apply for that one-off payment. Let's have a look now at the impact of making that withdrawal. And in some cases, the impact can be significant. Certainly the younger you are now, the greater the impact will be. So this chart I've put up there, it gives you various ages. So it's a matter of working out, okay, well, how old are you at the moment? What bracket do you really fall into? And then I've shown the impact of withdrawing the full 20,000 if you're eligible. What impact will that have on your super account balance at age 67? So we've drawn a line in the sand and said, let's have a look at the impact at age 67. Now, obviously, the impact will actually keep on going if you don't replenish this withdrawal after you've taken it out. The impact will basically last for the rest of your life. But we've drawn that line in the sand and said, what's the impact? And if you look on the chart here, a 25-year-old now who makes that $20,000 withdrawal, it's likely to have a $45,000 impact on your age 67 superannuation account balance. Now that 45,000, that's in today's buying power. The actual number that it'll have an impact on is quite significantly higher, but that'll buy you what $45,000 does today. We've brought everything back to today's buying power. You can see there, someone who's 40 years old, the impact won't be as big. You're looking at a $34,000 reduction at age 67, but it's still significant. Now, these numbers we've put together, they're based on an assumed earning rate of 5.75% a year. So the reason we've come up with that number is our investment objective for the Cbus growth option is 3.25% above inflation. So if I've assumed inflation running at 2.5% in these numbers, that's where we get the 5.75% growth rate. Now, bear in mind, if we outperform our investment objective over time, the impact at age 67 will be even more significant than what I've shown there. But we are putting forward the projections based on our investment objective. The key thing here is you should always consider all other options before accessing this money from your super account. Let's have a look at what some of those options could be. Firstly, maybe you've got a healthy bank account there that you can draw down. You can draw down on your cash reserves just to top up maybe your reduced income. So I'd hate to think that there's members there who have a nice healthy cash reserve, but they still look to withdraw this money out of super. It could end up being a very costly withdrawal. Also, if you've had your hours at work reduced or your pay reduced, and let's say you had a voluntary contribution scheme in place where maybe you were salary sacrificing some of your wages to super, or maybe making tax deductible contributions or after tax contributions, this may be the time when you want to just wind back those, suspend them until such time as you're back working and earning the sort of income that you were previously. So have a look at, okay, the revenues that we could just suspend our spending. Also have a think about, okay, is it likely that you could be eligible for a tax refund come the end of the financial year? This certainly may apply if you haven't worked for the full year. Tax may have been taken out at a certain rate, but because you haven't worked for the full year, you may be eligible for a tax refund. So certainly factor that in to your thinking. Also, check on the Centrelink programs. Now, we touched on the Job Seeker and the Job Keeper program, but also remember they do have a healthcare card. There's a low-income healthcare card. It's not asset tested. It is income tested, but if you've got reduced or no income, you may find you qualify. And that can just give you a bit of a handout with ongoing costs such as lower pharmaceutical costs. There could be reductions in utility bills. There could be reduction in motor vehicle registration. So it can vary from state to state. So it's important to touch base with Centrelink to see if that's an option. Also, let's think outside the box and maybe have a look around. Maybe there's some casual work you could get involved in, or part-time or self-employed work. So it may not be in the industry that you've been used to working in, but let's not discount it. And while many companies are contracting and then they're not actually putting on workforce, there are some industries that are actually booming and they are looking for casual or part-time workers or full-time workers. So again, have a look outside the box and see if there's any other work available out there. Now, this one's a good one. Look, I think if any of us went through our house and looked at any unwanted items that we could potentially sell, I reckon we could probably fill a room full. So just have a wander through the house and see, are there things that could be readily converted to cash just to build up your cash reserves? This point's important. Put together a budget planner. Now more so than ever, you want to know, okay, what are my necessary expenses? What's the must-have? I know how much income I either have or haven't got coming in the door, but what are my expenses? So once you've highlighted and itemized all of those expenses, then have a look at reducing that non-essential spending. And this will be different for everyone. What's non-essential for me may not be non-essential for you. So it's a matter of going through your list and working out, really, what can we do without, even if it's just for the time being. And then where applicable, if you're dealing with a bank because you may have a mortgage or personal loan or car loans, etc., have a talk to them to see if there's a possibility for maybe getting some repayment reduction or a deferral, or maybe you've got access to a mortgage offset account. So have a chat to the bank and see, is there some way that we can just lighten the load a little bit. Also, if you're renting your home, have a chat to the landlord and see, is there some agreement you can come to, whether it's a reduction or just a freeze on rent payments for a set period of time. And here I would always say, don't look for stop signs. Don't think, oh, look, my bank's not going to, go easy on me, or my landlord's not going to. You may be pleasantly surprised. So certainly have that chat with them. And also, if you've got kids at school, have a chat to the school and see if there's a possibility of getting some fee relief. So what we're trying to do is really try to limit the outgoings. We're trying to get some reprieve while you may have reduced or no other income at the moment. Other things to consider, there's 4 other important elements. If you make this withdrawal out of your super, will there be enough money left in there to pay your insurance? Now with Cbus, you may have life insurance or total and permanent disablement insurance or income protection insurance. You want to make sure that there's enough money in there to keep that insurance in place if that insurance is important to you. Also, will you be locking in a recent investment loss? Well, at the moment, yes, you would be, because we know that 2 months ago or 3 months ago, markets were pretty well at an all-time high. By withdrawing some money now, you will be crystallizing that loss, and that money that you pull out won't participate in any future recovery. Also, could this affect your lifestyle in retirement? Well, you saw by the chart we looked at that yes, for most people, it is going to have an impact on your retirement lifestyle. So you really need to factor that into account. And finally, if by pulling this money out now, if it resulted in you having a low account balance, let's say below $6,000, and if there was no future activity on your account for 16 months, Cbus would be compelled to move or transfer your account across to the ATO. So you really want to understand, okay, if you were to pull this money out, is that going to take your Cbus account balance below 6,000? Just be mindful of that. And look, I've given you some links here on if you have further questions or want some further information on how the super withdrawal works, or just more information on COVID-19 updates, etc. The links there for both members and for employers. I've also given you a couple of links there to the ATO website, which give more information on dealing with COVID-19, and in particular, this early access to super. Finally, the first port of call, if you've got more questions about whether you should be pulling this money out of super now, by all means, give the Cbus advice team a call. Give them a call on 1300 361 784, and then go through to option 4 to be connected. So they're there to help you and give you guidance about perhaps the impacts if you were to decide to take this money out, or are there other avenues. Alternatively, contact your local Cbus coordinator. They're well placed to give you some general information and some guidance around this topic. But otherwise, look, thanks so much for watching. Please stay safe, look after one another, but certainly touch base with Cbus if you have any more questions around the early release of super. Thanks so much for joining me. And as I said, always contact the Cbus advice team as the first port of call, or your local coordinator. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.